What if I told you that one of cinema's most beloved time travel masterpieces was created by an underage actress working illegally, built over a parking lot, and featured Oscar-winning lava made from rotting breakfast cereal? The 1960 classic The Time Machine holds secrets more shocking than any future George could have imagined when he first pulled that crystal lever. Today, we're diving deep into 20 mind-blowing revelations that prove this Victorian adventure was crafted through pure Hollywood magic, desperate creativity, and a few questionable legal decisions. From hidden cartoon characters to childhood sleds inspiring iconic props, these facts will completely change how you see George Pal's timeless masterpiece. And if you're ready to discover Hollywood's best-kept secrets, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because we're about to reveal industry tricks that studios never wanted you to know. Let's start our countdown to the most shocking truth of all. Number 20. The illegal underage star. When audiences fell in love with Weena, the innocent Eloi who captured George's heart in the year 802-701, they had no idea they were watching a crime in progress. Yvette Mimieux, who portrayed the ethereal future woman, was actually underage when filming began, just 17 years old and turning 18 during production. This created a massive legal problem that MGM desperately tried to cover up. Child labor laws in 1960 strictly prohibited minors from working full adult shooting schedules, yet Mimieux was pulling 12-hour days alongside the adult cast. The studio knew they were breaking federal regulations, but George Pal was so convinced she was perfect for the role that they decided to risk the legal consequences. Studio lawyers worked overtime to create fake documentation and scheduling workarounds, while Mimieux herself remained unaware of the legal chaos swirling around her casting. The gamble paid off artistically, but it could have shut down the entire production if authorities had discovered the violation. Number 19. The parking lot that became the future. The breathtaking underground world of the Eloi, with its ethereal gardens and mysterious architecture, looks like it was filmed in some exotic location or elaborate soundstage. The shocking reality is that this crucial set was hastily constructed over a parking lot behind the MGM studios. If you look carefully at certain wide shots, you can actually still see the faint white parking space lines bleeding through the hastily applied set flooring. The production was so strapped for space and money that they had to get creative with every available square foot of studio property. The parking lot set was built in just 6 days, with the art department using forced perspective and clever camera angles to make the cramped space appear vast and otherworldly. Cast members later recalled having to step over parking meters that couldn't be removed in time, which were simply painted to blend in with the futuristic scenery. This makeshift approach created one of the film's most memorable locations, proving that Hollywood magic often comes from pure desperation and ingenuity. Number 18. The ceiling that never existed. The Eloi habitat appears to be bathed in natural, ethereal lighting that gives their underground world an almost divine quality. This wasn't achieved through expensive lighting equipment or revolutionary techniques. It was created by the simple fact that the set had no ceiling whatsoever. The entire underground world was actually shot completely outdoors under natural California sunlight. George Pal made this decision purely to save money on lighting costs, but it accidentally created one of the film's most distinctive visual elements. The natural lighting streaming down from above gave the Eloi world an otherworldly glow that no artificial lighting could have replicated. The cinematographer later admitted they spent days trying to figure out how to explain why an underground civilization had such beautiful natural lighting, eventually deciding to simply ignore the logical inconsistency. Audiences never questioned it because the visual effect was so stunning, proving that sometimes the best creative decisions come from budget constraints rather than artistic vision. Number 17. The hidden Woody Woodpecker. Embedded within the serious Victorian drama of The Time Machine lies a secret cartoon character that 99% of viewers have never spotted. During the sequence where George first demonstrates his miniature time machine model to his dinner guests, a tiny Woody Woodpecker figurine can be glimpsed for exactly 3 frames among the items on his desk. This wasn't a coincidence or accidental placement. George Pal had previously created several Woody Woodpecker animated shorts for Universal Studios before transitioning to live-action films. The miniature figurine was his personal tribute to his animation roots, placed strategically where only the most eagle-eyed viewers might catch it. The prop master later revealed that Pal specifically requested the Woody placement as a calling card for animation enthusiasts who might recognize his earlier work. This tiny detail represents Pal's evolution from cartoon creator to live-action visionary, hidden in plain sight within his most celebrated film. Number 16. The atomic clock face. The Time Machine's control panel features what appears to be an ornate Victorian-era clock face, but the shocking truth is that this seemingly period-appropriate detail was actually salvaged from a 1950s atomic research facility. The clock mechanism came from a decommissioned Geiger counter that MGM's prop department acquired from a government surplus sale. This atomic age component gave the time machine an unintentionally prophetic element, considering the film's themes about nuclear destruction and humanity's future. The irony wasn't lost on George Pal, who later claimed this was a happy accident that perfectly symbolized the bridge between Victorian optimism and atomic age anxiety. The Geiger counter's precise timing mechanism also provided the authentic mechanical clicking sounds heard throughout the time travel sequences, creating an audio texture that no purpose-built movie prop could have achieved. What appeared to be period-accurate craftsmanship was actually cutting-edge atomic technology disguised as Victorian elegance. Number 15. The British Invasion That Never Was. Rod Taylor's casting as George was controversial because major British actors were convinced the role was rightfully theirs. David Niven, James Mason, and even a young Peter O'Toole all campaigned aggressively for the part, arguing that only a genuine British actor could properly portray H.G. Wells's Victorian inventor. The studio received angry letters from British Actors Equity claiming that casting an Australian was cultural appropriation of English literary heritage. George Pal faced enormous pressure from MGM executives to cast a bankable British star, but he insisted that Taylor's rugged physicality was essential for the role's action sequences. The compromise almost fell through when James Mason threatened to withdraw from future MGM projects if he wasn't considered. Studio head Dor Sherry had to personally intervene, convincing the British actors that Taylor's colonial background actually made him more authentically Victorian than modern British performers. This casting controversy created lasting resentment in Hollywood's British community, with several prominent English actors refusing to work with George Pal for years afterward. Number 14. The Generational Acting Challenge. Alan Young's dual role as both David Philby and his son James required more than just aging makeup. It demanded a complete transformation of his acting style to portray two different generations convincingly. Young spent weeks studying elderly men at local nursing homes, observing how age changes not just appearance but voice patterns, posture, and even breathing rhythms. The makeup process for the elderly James Philby took 6 hours daily, using revolutionary latex techniques that were experimental at the time. Young had to arrive at the studio at 3 a.m. to complete the transformation, often falling asleep in the makeup chair while prosthetics dried. The psychological challenge was equally demanding. Young created entirely separate character backgrounds for father and son, including different childhood memories and life experiences that would never appear in the script but informed his performances. This method acting approach was unusual for 1960s genre filmmaking, where actors typically relied more on external transformation than internal character development. Number 13. The Forbidden Planet Wardrobe Raid. MGM's costume department didn't just borrow a few items from Forbidden Planet, they systematically stripped that production's entire wardrobe department, reusing everything from civilian clothes to military uniforms. The most obvious examples appear during the World War sequences, where background actors wear uniforms identical to those worn by the United Planet's cruiser crew 4 years earlier. What's particularly shocking is that some costumes were literally turned inside out or dyed different colors to disguise their origins. The Eloi's flowing garments were actually Altaran robes from Forbidden Planet, bleached white and altered with different necklines. Studio accountants calculated that this costume recycling saved over $50,000, nearly 10% of the film's entire budget. The practice was so systematic that MGM created a detailed catalog matching each time machine costume to its Forbidden Planet origin, treating the wardrobe raid like a military operation designed to squeeze maximum value from previous investments. Number 12. The Star Trek connection that changed sci-fi. Hua Chang's work on the Time Machine was essentially a training ground for creating the most iconic props in science fiction history. While designing the Morlock masks and Time Machine components, Chang was simultaneously developing the techniques and aesthetic sensibilities that would later produce Star Trek's phasers, communicators, and tricorders. Chang kept detailed notebooks during Time Machine production, documenting every material, technique, and design principle he discovered. These notes became his blueprint for Star Trek's prop design philosophy, the idea that futuristic technology should feel tactile and believable rather than purely fantastical. The brass and crystal aesthetic of the Time Machine directly influenced the metallic, functional appearance of Starfleet equipment. Chang later admitted that Captain Kirk's communicator was essentially a miniaturized version of the Time Machine's control panel, designed using identical principles of combining Victorian craftsmanship with futuristic functionality. Number 11. The London That Never Left California. The Victorian London streetscapes weren't just filmed in California, they were built using recycled sets from MGM's backlot that had previously represented everything from medieval villages to Wild West towns. The same facades that housed cowboys in B-westerns were redressed with Victorian signage and gas lamps to create George's neighborhood. The fog effects that give the London scenes their atmospheric quality were created using dry ice machines borrowed from the studio's horror film productions, specifically the equipment used for Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde remakes. This created an unintentionally spooky atmosphere that perfectly matched the film's themes of time and mortality. The cobblestone streets were actually painted concrete designed to look aged, with studio artists using coffee grounds and tea stains to create realistic weathering effects. Local Culver City residents could literally walk onto the MGM backlot and find themselves standing in Victorian London, complete with period-appropriate lighting and sound effects. Number 10. The painted apple tree illusion. The time-lapse sequence of the apple tree growing, blooming, and changing seasons wasn't achieved through traditional stop-motion animation with real objects. Artist Bill Brace created an enormous canvas painting and manually added each leaf, apple, and seasonal change frame by frame, photographing his work with a locked camera position. This technique required Brace to paint over 2,000 individual variations of the same tree, working for 6 weeks straight to create just 30 seconds of screen time. He had to maintain perfect consistency in lighting, perspective, and color balance while manually adding and removing hundreds of painted elements. The process was so labor-intensive that Brace nearly suffered a nervous breakdown, leading to the studio hiring a full-time assistant just to mix his paints and clean brushes. The final effect was so convincing that botanical experts contacted MGM asking about the accelerated growth techniques, not realizing they were looking at painted artwork rather than actual photography. Number 9. The childhood sled that inspired time travel. George Pal's inspiration for the time machine's distinctive design came from a specific sled he owned as a child in Hungary, a ornate wooden sledge with brass fittings that belonged to his wealthy grandfather. Pal kept detailed sketches of this childhood sled in his personal notebooks for over 30 years, waiting for the right project to incorporate its elegant curves and metallic details. The sled represented more than just visual inspiration. It embodied Pal's philosophy about time travel as a joyful, almost childlike experience of gliding through temporal landscapes. He instructed the prop builders to recreate not just the sled's appearance but its emotional resonance, ensuring that the time machine would evoke feelings of wonder and adventure rather than clinical scientific precision. Pal's original childhood sled was actually shipped from Hungary to the MGM prop department, where craftsmen used it as a direct template for the time machine's base structure. This personal connection gave the time machine an authenticity that no purely imagined design could have achieved. Number 8. The sub-$1 million miracle. The entire production budget for the time machine was just $829,000, less than what modern films spend on craft services. To put this in perspective, Ben-Hur, released the previous year, cost $15 million. George Pal had to create 2 distinct time periods, build futuristic sets, design revolutionary special effects, and cast recognizable stars with less money than most contemporary films spent on costumes alone. This extreme budget constraint forced innovations that accidentally became the film's greatest strengths. Instead of expensive location shooting, the compressed sets created an intimate theatrical atmosphere. Rather than hiring experienced special effects teams, young artists experimented with untested techniques that produced more original results. The financial limitations eliminated every unnecessary element, resulting in a streamlined narrative that never wastes a single scene or line of dialogue. Every decision was made with ruthless efficiency, creating a film where artistic vision and economic necessity merged into something more powerful than either could have achieved independently. Number 7. The 29-day shooting marathon. MGM gave George Pal exactly 29 days to complete principal photography, a schedule so compressed that union representatives initially refused to approve it. Most comparable films required 60 to 90 shooting days, but Pal had to capture 2 different time periods, multiple locations, complex special effects sequences, and intimate character moments in less than a month. The cast and crew worked 6-day weeks with 12-hour daily schedules, creating a pressure cooker environment that paradoxically improved performances. Rod Taylor later claimed that the time constraint eliminated any opportunity for self-doubt or overthinking, forcing everyone to trust their instincts and first impulses. Yvette Mimieux described the experience as like being shot from a cannon, terrifying but exhilarating. The rapid pace meant that elaborate special effects had to be achieved practically and immediately, with no time for extensive post-production refinement. This created a raw, authentic energy that gives the film its distinctive immediacy and emotional urgency. Number 6. The fermented oatmeal apocalypse. The Oscar-winning volcanic eruption sequence that destroys civilization was created using hundreds of gallons of oatmeal that was deliberately fermented for weeks to achieve the perfect bubbling texture. The oatmeal was dyed with food coloring and corn syrup, then left to rot in large vats until it developed the right consistency and naturally occurring bubbles. The smell was so overwhelming that several crew members became physically ill during filming, and the studio had to install industrial ventilation fans just to make the soundstage habitable. The fermented oatmeal created authentic-looking lava flows that moved with realistic viscosity, but the stench was so powerful that it lingered in the studio for months afterward. Future productions shooting on the same stage complained about mysterious odors that couldn't be eliminated. The effects team later admitted they had no idea fermented oatmeal would smell so terrible, but the visual results were so spectacular that they endured the olfactory assault rather than start over with a different material. Number 5. The stop-motion fashion revolution. The famous mannequin sequence showing fashion evolution through decades wasn't achieved with a single mannequin. It required 17 different mannequins, each dressed in period-appropriate costumes and photographed individually. The stop-motion animation team had to research fashion history extensively, creating accurate representations of women's clothing from the 1890s through the 1960s. Each costume change required precise positioning to maintain the illusion of a single mannequin transforming, with artists using reference marks and measurement techniques borrowed from cartoon animation. The sequence took 3 weeks to photograph, with costumers working around the clock to create authentic period garments that would only appear for a few frames each. The fashion research became so detailed that MGM's costume department created a comprehensive catalog of women's clothing evolution that was later used by other studios for period films. This 30-second sequence required more historical research and practical craftsmanship than most feature-length costume dramas. Number 4. The time-lapse photography revolution. The Academy Award-winning special effects weren't just technically impressive, they pioneered time-lapse techniques that became standard practice throughout the film industry. The effects team invented new camera mechanisms that could advance film frame by frame with perfect precision, creating equipment that didn't exist anywhere else in Hollywood. The sun and moon racing across the sky required cameras that could operate continuously for weeks, automatically advancing single frames at predetermined intervals while maintaining perfect exposure and focus. The technical challenges were so complex that MGM's engineering department had to design custom camera mounts, timing mechanisms, and lighting systems specifically for this production. These innovations were later adopted by nature documentary filmmakers and became the foundation for modern time-lapse cinematography. The techniques developed for the time machine were so advanced that they weren't fully understood or replicated by other studios until nearly a decade later. Number 3. The Wells family name tribute. The decision to name the protagonist George Wells wasn't just a simple tribute to H.G. Wells, it was a carefully negotiated legal strategy to avoid copyright complications with the Wells estate. The original novella's unnamed time traveler created legal ambiguities about character ownership, so MGM's lawyers insisted on creating a distinct character identity. George Pal proposed the name George Wells as a solution that honored the source material while establishing clear legal ownership of the film's specific interpretation. The Wells estate initially objected, fearing that audiences might confuse the character with the actual author, but eventually agreed after MGM promised prominent credit acknowledgments. This naming strategy became a template for future literary adaptations, showing studios how to honor source material while protecting their creative investments. The character name also served Pal's ego. George Wells combined his own first name with the author's surname, essentially inserting himself into literary history alongside one of science fiction's greatest writers. Number 2. The inexperience that required reshoots. Yvette Mimieux's inexperience wasn't just a minor production challenge, it was so severe that George Pal had to reshoot nearly 40% of her scenes after completing principal photography. Her early performances were so stiff and uncertain that test audiences couldn't connect with her character, threatening the entire film's emotional core. Rather than replace her or release a compromised film, Pal made the unprecedented decision to bring the cast back for extensive reshoots, focusing specifically on Mimieux's character development. These additional scenes weren't just technical corrections, they were complete reinterpretations of Weena's personality and her relationship with George. The reshoots cost nearly $100,000, representing 12% of the film's total budget, and required rebuilding sets that had already been destroyed. Mimieux later credited these reshoots with teaching her more about acting than any formal training could have provided, transforming her from an amateur performer into a genuine movie star through pure trial-by-fire experience. Number 1. The sled that started everything. The time machine's iconic design didn't originate from scientific speculation or artistic vision. It came from George Pal's specific childhood memory of riding his grandfather's ornate Hungarian sled through the snowy hills of Budapest. This wasn't just visual inspiration, but emotional archaeology, with Pal reconstructing a piece of his own past to power his vision of the future. The original sled, crafted by Hungarian artisans in the 1890s, featured the same brass fittings, curved runners, and elegant proportions that became the time machine's most recognizable elements. Pal's grandfather had been a successful merchant who commissioned the sled as a Christmas gift, incorporating decorative elements that reflected the family's prosperity and artistic sensibilities. When Pal emigrated to America, he carried detailed sketches and measurements of this sled, never knowing they would eventually become the blueprint for cinema's most famous time travel device. The emotional connection between childhood wonder and scientific possibility gave the time machine its unique personality. It wasn't just a vehicle for temporal transportation, but a vessel powered by nostalgia, memory, and the fundamental human desire to recapture the magical experiences of youth. From illegal underage casting to childhood sleds inspiring iconic props, the time machine proves that Hollywood's greatest achievements often emerge from chaos, desperation, and pure creative audacity. George Pal and his dedicated team transformed impossible limitations into timeless artistry, creating a masterpiece that continues to captivate audiences over 6 decades later. What other classic films are hiding secrets this shocking? Let us know in the comments which movie you want us to explore next, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible behind-the-scenes revelations that Hollywood never wanted you to discover. Until next time, keep questioning everything you think you know about your favorite films.